Start us off with an opening statement. We'll open it up for questions.
Opening statement. Thanks, Jeff. Great to see everybody. Awesome time of year. Certainly awesome week, given rivalry week. I know Coach just gave all the skinny on that. For us, overlap season, right, with fall sports still competing and going incredibly successfully. I might add, I'll talk about a little bit for Clemson, and then obviously winter sports getting started, and inclusive of gymnastics for the first time ever here at Clemson. So happy to talk through all of that, but just a very busy and exciting time of year for us administratively and in support of all 21 of our sports. Obviously just want to start with incredible appreciation and thanks for our fans and IPTAY donors, and certainly coming off the last home game this past Saturday. My notes say this was our highest attended season for the first time since 2015. So I don't know what the deputy AD in 2015 was thinking as it relates to attendance and capacity count, but we just came a couple hundred tickets short through a full sellout for all 7 games, which is just uncommon. It really is. And I know Coach has been so consistent throughout all the his availability this fall, and I would even echo and be really direct of just as far as his discussion and appreciation that he has to the team, and his emphasis that it's just uncommon and different here at Clemson, and it's easy for us to just kind of feel that. We know Clemson's different in that regard, but when you take a half step back, and particularly as you look back and close a home schedule year, it's just really special. So Saturday was no different, but this season was no different all throughout, and the appreciation we have certainly for our fans, 22,000 plus IPTAY members. It is just really strong and special here. Relatedly, you saw our announcement on Friday about 110 Society, new NIL collective in the Clemson community, and the opportunity that IPTAY and we have from an educational standpoint and awareness within our community about the 110 Society from a collective standpoint, how that is able to work with donors and communities, businesses in our community about opportunities for student athletes. We couldn't be more aggressive and prioritized on how NIL programming, funding, fundraising works in support of our student athletes. It's just really necessary. And it certainly continues to ebb and flow day by day, let alone as we continue to add programming and resources and work within our community for the 110 Society, which is now launched as the new collective, how that's transitioned in the community. So you're going to continue to see a very strong presence for education, for awareness, for fundraising opportunities from us and IPTAY, and how that works with the 110 Society for them to work, again, with donors, with businesses, and connect with our student athletes. So excited about that launch. Want to continue to be very present with that, as Coach Sweeney will, and all of our coaches, just from the awareness and resources and prioritization for name, image, and likeness for our student athletes. Excited of where we sit and what's ahead as it relates to that priority for all things that it's important to. I touched on some of our sports and sport updates, and even with the fall sports, certainly soccer's incredible fall for both men's and women's soccer. We host women's soccer on Saturday at 1 o'clock for the chance for the first time ever Clemson women's soccer to advance to the College Cup. Coach Radwanski has just built a dominant program here, and the ability to have at Riggs and host the next step towards the College Cup for women's soccer program is really special. So excited for Saturday at 1, leading into obviously the road game in Columbia on Saturday evening. I'm gonna do both and try to have a really successful Saturday for both those teams. Following Coach Noonan, certainly in his Sweet 16 matchup with his program on Sunday, which has just kind of become a staple for that program, hitting the road to New Hampshire on Sunday. I think we're one of 2 or 3, Jeff, universities that have both soccer teams still competing at this stage of the NCAA. So really excited for what that has been all season in Riggs. Again, not no different than how it's been in the Valley as it relates to fan support and attendance. We were top 5 in the country as it relates to both men's and women's soccer attendance and ticket sales. It's just really thematic throughout all of our sports. Even gymnastics, as I referenced earlier, as we've gone on sale for the first time ever gymnastics season ticket sales. We've sold over 2,500 season tickets for gymnastics, which is also top 5 in the country. Haven't even had a home meet yet. So we'll have an exhibition match, kind of a gymnastics 101 on December 8th and a couple Fridays, and then our first home meet will be January 12th, second Friday in January. So Clemson Gymnastics will be really special in our community. couldn't be more excited about that launch and the competition for those programs. And certainly football or basketball, both men's and women's, great start to their seasons. A lot of energy and anticipation for both those programs as we get into continuing non-conference play, let alone into conference play later this month, and then through the winter. So a lot of activity, a lot going on, not even to mention NCAA cross country. Gladys Chepnachich finished in the top 25 from a NCAA cross country championship. I know that doesn't maybe get the headlines as much, but first time that we've had a qualifier, let alone a placing that high since 2018. So really excited, again, across the board and all 21 sports, which is certainly my lens here for this fall and winter for Clemson athletics. So facilities updates, happy to dive into those. We've started significant construction on the Watt Family Performance and Wellness Center, which is just south of Jervy and Jervy Gym up Perimeter Road, as we're continuing construction and completion of the women's sports expansion project up at rowing facility up East Beach Road, which is lacrosse, gymnastics, and rowing. So that work continues, which you know is a staple for us here at Clemson, certainly has been over the past decade, and happy for continued progress on those and other projects that we're looking at that I'm happy to dive into. So with that said, certainly rivalry week, excited to see Coach Tanner on Saturday. He and I have been in constant contact as we always are. He's been a great friend and partner with our roles, and as we come together on Saturday in Williams Price, we'll be happy to gather with him. I actually owe him a text message from earlier on another matter, but the rivalry piece, I caught the back end of Coach Sweeney's stories on Coach Spurrier, etc. Certainly for the ADs and for Ray and I, that's a really important relationship and a strong one just from a communication standpoint. So look forward to Saturday, all the things heretofore and beyond that. So happy to jump into any conversation or direction from here.
On football rivalry stuff, you speak to the importance of that rivalry no matter what changes for anybody. And have you guys struck a contract for the next round of that? Yep.
Yeah, great question, Chappell. I don't believe we've struck a contract, and quite frankly, we will and we need to, right? There's the paperworking aspect of it, but yeah, it's just a non-negotiable, and Ray and I have talked about we have and will continue to play that game, period. However, landscape continues to change. No conversations otherwise, no mindset otherwise, absolutely.
There's been a lot of talk with the SEC going to non-conference games as they expand, but even if they do that, so I know the SEC canceled this game in 2020, even though both schools wanted to play.
That's right.
Ending a long streak of consecutive meetings, but no thought to discontinuing that at all if they do move to 9 games.
Right. The SEC hasn't. I know that's something that they're considering. Yeah, should Coach Tanner and I have talked about that. Should the SEC change their conference matchups, would expect. I certainly would, and I know his mindset is to continue to play this game. Yeah, period.
Could the date change earlier in the year as opposed to late in the year with those schedules?
It always could. Yeah, it always could. And I know, I guess at various times the rivalry has been played earlier in the season or to start the season or at various times. So, I think we both feel that it's in a really good traditional spot at this last week of the season. So we haven't struck conversations. I would put that as sure it could. And I think we'd have to be responsive to the changing landscape of college athletics as it relates to when that schedule is, right? There's been discussions nationally as it relates to moving the whole season up a week and week 0 and how that plays into the calendar of the month of December and CFP expansion, et cetera. So I think that's squarely in, hey, we need to be strategic and adaptive to just all aspects, changing calendar for the sport or otherwise. But at this point, no active conversations on that.
For the landscape note, it's the elephant in the room. I don't know how else to phrase it, but
Come on, Pete. How we phrasing it?
What's going on with all that's been reported and all the questions you've had to answer about it over the past several months? Where is this school's place in the conference landscape within the short term and the long term?
Yeah, I couldn't be more confident, more proud of how Clemson is viewed nationally. Sure, and again, so much work goes into that at all levels, and the alignment that we talk about so much from our board of trustees, President Clements, of course, who is so well read and engaged and networked in college athletics, what that means for Clemson, let alone the industry. So that alignment that we talk about often, it is really so critical when it relates to institutional decisions and order of magnitude as the changing landscape of college athletics is. And Pete, when we talk about that, it means a whole lot more than just conference affiliation, right? Collegiate athletics model, sure, football, CFP scheduling we talked about, and all the things. And so that consistent communication and strategy and alignment is something that really shows through, and I think we are so well positioned and really differently in that regard. That being said, listen, we're going to continue to do what's best for Clemson, and to be incredibly well read on all things landscape, network, contacts, at all levels. And yeah, we have consultants and support that we look to do that, and it's my job to continue to position us and to be connected and to be nimble and strategic as it relates to the changing landscape. Within that, we are great members of the ACC, and we're going to continue to be great members of the conference that we're in. That's really important. That means kind of day-to-day in meetings and strategy and football scheduling, right, all those things, how we talk about that publicly, like I'm doing here and otherwise. And we have a lot of staff and coaches and public meetings that are really important, that we're aligned and being great members of the conference we're in. That's our obligation as Clemson. And we have a duty to help raise the value of our conference in the ACC, and that's what we're going to continue to do while looking out and doing what's best for Clemson.
How constant and consistent are conversations about conference realignment these days for you?
Yeah, we talk with everybody internally and externally. Again, unapologetically, just to continue to be well positioned and well read. There's just so many moving aspects of collegiate athletics, right? I don't know a better way to say it other than that active dialogue internally and externally just remains to be very present. And I think Clemson, not unlike many others, are just very connected and very active in those conversations, and would expect to be so. And so we'll have very candid conversations internally and externally within the landscape, and expect that to continue going forward, right? There's no mile marker or anticipatory, great, here's finality, right? It's just a changing dynamic landscape. And again, I view that these conversations beyond just conference affiliation. It's just that much of a moving aspect of our industry right now, and so we're going to remain very active with that.
Obviously, money is the driving factor for all of this realignment and change, and with the SEC and the Big Ten and the big contracts, that's what everybody has to look at. How long do you think Clemson could, continue to compete at a current level if earning levels stay the same within the ACC? And then the second part is, has the conference talked any more about, hey, let's do some incentive-based, money talks for you guys?
Yeah, distributions. Yeah.
Distribution.
Yeah. Well phrased, David. I'll maybe work backwards. I'm excited. I know the conference has been forward, Commissioner Phillips about, and the President's Group about what's being deemed ACC Success Initiative model, which would allow for dollars to be earned more based on success, right? Success initiatives, and that's done to encourage or incentivize investment and ultimately performance, right? And sports of football and basketball certainly carry most of the value, and so they're focused there. So I do expect over the coming months for that to be fully adopted, and again, there's been good public discussion about that, and expect Clemson to, we will. Our intention is to certainly have success and therefore gather more dollars from the ACC in that regard. It's important. The Commissioner has really prioritized that within the league, has for quite some time, a year and a half now. And so for that to be essentially at the finish line is really important, and the ACC is leading in that regard. That being said, you started the question, David, saying this is all about money, and I understand the economics of it, certainly. Our budget in the athletics department is $161 million, and that is certainly in my responsibility to manage our department, the business of Clemson Athletics, and ultimately gather as many resources as we can to support our student athletes and our competitive success. That being said, I wouldn't say it's all about the money, the economics. Certainly the brand platform, the ability to compete nationally, brand awareness, furdering our institution, that's what our athletics department, what Clemson Athletics is, the adage of front porch. Sure, I'm not going to preach on that. We understand that. But athletics is just different, and it's really, really important at Clemson and how that speaks to, and we've seen certainly over the past decade, just the brand prominence of our institution, application rates, academic profile, geography of applicants. I hosted a good friend of mine's family from Tulsa, Oklahoma this weekend. She's a high school junior and she wants to come check out Clemson, and I know that's kind of always been the case, but there's just more and more of that brand and national perception that is important for our whole institution. And so yes, the economics, and I'm not dismissing your point because you're right, like the resources are a huge component of this, but we view it to be more than that. And how all those ingredients go into conversations and strategy and how much we talk internally and externally, it's just really, really important at Clemson at the highest levels. And again, that alignment piece certainly speaks to that, and that's why it's such a priority for us to be well connected, well read, and really focused on prioritizing the best economic and brand platform for Clemson.
Graham, I was just about to ask you about the revenue distribution model. Obviously, football generates a lot more money than basketball, and Clemson's had a lot more success in the sport of football. Do you lobby with Commissioner Phillips and the ACC to, have the distribution, commensurate with the money that those sports generate?
Yeah, certainly, but I think that's been pretty consistent within the league, that all members that football from a television and a media value does drive the most of the dollars. So let's align success and opportunity to earn more dollars based on that. So sure, that's certainly my lens, and but I do think that's relatively shared within the league.
Do you sense that since last spring when the model first began to be discussed, that it's becoming more of a conversation that's easier to have among the ACC membership, that an ACC could move forward with a structured principle, whereas maybe that kind of caught a lot of people by surprise or didn't hit them the right way, so to speak, last spring when that first kind of was discussed?
Yeah, I think if I understand the question, Pete, I'll answer, but if you please redirect me if I'm off. I think it's certainly an aspect of the ACC is being a leader in this regard, right? And the equivalent revenue distribution that the ACC's we currently have and has had is not uncommon, or it's like most all other conferences. I know there's some one-offs out there a little bit. So I think that this model is unique to, or again, is a leader as it relates to how the ACC is looking to have distributions change in the future. And do other conferences follow suit or kind of review that and maybe construct something similarly? I'm not sure, but I know there's been a lot of conversation that I've had from colleagues outside of the ACC interested in how the ACC is going about this, because economics, revenues to college athletics continue to change. Again, the changing landscape and collegiate model, and so I think there's a generally accepted, hey, we need to look through things differently from a distribution standpoint across the board beyond just the ACC. And so it is good for the ACC to be a leader in that regard.
So along those lines, those who may have protested initially that thought, do you think maybe they've kind of come around more to that, just because everything has to change and evolve over time? Maybe they're more in line with that thing.
I see, yeah. I think that's right, Pete. And again, the presidents are the ones that vote on this model as they did with expansion. And how the ACC has effectively tied those two components together and moving forward with expansion and with revenue distribution. Yeah, I think there is good consensus within the league about this as an appropriate and strategic next step. Yeah.
These NCAA lawsuits are comparatively off the radar, like relative to realignment talk, which is obviously very sexy. I'm curious, like when you have a trustee or a constituent who asks you, hey, what's this all about? This is a big deal. What do you say? Like as it relates to realignment and where we could be headed.
Yeah, well said, Larry. And you're right. You phrase it off the radar, and it might be if you follow the headlines or the tweets, but it's not in our evaluation and strategy with it. And a little bit of my mentions earlier of it's easy just to think conference affiliation. I got it. I know that's really transactional to talk about, but it's a big consider. There are many variables and inputs to considerations of how we're positioning Clemson nationally, including NCAA national issues and lawsuits. Sure, we are well read on all of those. It's really important just to be at the ready to understand the implications and the dominoes and the strategy with that. And so yes, absolutely, we group all of those aspects of the changing collegiate model, some of which we can control, some of which we can't, into part of the bigger picture of our dialogue and strategy.
UADs in administrators across the country as you announce these new collectives for your various schools, and you kind of spin it a certain way. But I mean, the vast majority of the public, I would say, still sees it as pay-for-play, for the players. And those who follow recruiting, when a school doesn't get a particular player, he goes somewhere else. They're being outbid. And how do you shoot that down? How is that not true when we know the collectives are getting money to funnel to the players? How can you say, I'm not picking on you, just cross the board, your industry.
You ADs, I think is how you phrased the question. Yeah, right. Yeah.
How do you look at people and say we're not paying the players straight up? We're not trying to outbid another school for a player. When somebody tampers with our player because they offer more money,
Yeah.
how can y'all turn a blind eye to that?
Yeah. A couple things. Certainly the awareness and the discussion that I have with all 16 of our head coaches, 21 sports, it takes NIL activation and again, even call it stories or how things may be alleged to be working. They take different forms and fashions in every sport. So very well aware and active in understanding from our coaches how that works at Clemson, or more so to your point, Phil, from an industry standpoint. Listen, I couldn't be more proud and excited about where Clemson, where we position the programming, the resources, the education, work with IPTE for NIL, and again, 110 Society is a big part of that from Friday, a big next iteration there. But also, and more to your question, maybe Phil, of how our coaches, start with Coach Sweeney, sure, but on down, position NIL as it relates to our student athletes and recruitment, which is kind of what you're getting at. And I know Coach Sweeney's talked about it a lot, but it's a pervasive thought and strategy amongst most all of our programs that, hey, NIL is important, right? It is, and it's now been 2.5 years since the NCAA allowed for name, image, and likeness earning opportunities, and so, but it's continued. The paradigm has continued to shift and grow, and how that looks competitively. And so, how we position, how Coach Sweeney for his football program, how Coach Butler for her women's basketball program, go across the board, how they position NIL from a recruitment standpoint, and. Yeah, it's important that we have the resources and the support for our student athletes that they can come to Clemson and take part in NIL and build their brand and be educated and supported as well as any program in the country. Like, I believe that. But it's also one that's not the reason why, that's not how our coaches would recruit them to come here. And again, I know that's a little bit of a blanket statement, but that's very much the sentiment that I have with our coaches, and I think how that fits Clemson and how our coaches know how they're attracting and recruiting student athletes that would conversely fit Clemson. So I hope that addresses it to the level of specificity that I can or I'm comfortable with, Phil. But I do think that, again, I'm really encouraged and excited as the landscape continues to change and name, image, likeness continues to mature, and locally, let alone nationally, and how that would fit, that we're really well positioned in how that fits within our programs on behalf of our student athletes.
You read social media, a lot of people say Dabo hates NIL, Clemson can't compete because they're not as big as Texas A&M with a graduate base. But yet people at Florida State say Clemson's one of the top 5 most aggressive schools in terms of NIL. Maybe that doesn't necessarily translate to money because you're not giving $75,000 to offensive linemen when you get a pancake house. But how do you feel like Clemson compares nationally to these schools, that do have bigger alumni bases?
That's right. The notion of we fight above our weight class, which I know even President Clemens talks about a lot as it relates to Clemson and our 180,000 plus living alums, of which really interesting, David, and I think about this from a business of Clemson athletics, and this is a little bit of a tangent, I'll rope it into answering your question. Of our 180,000 plus living alums at Clemson, about a third, 60,000 of them or so approximately, President Clemens, who's in his 11th year now, has shook their hand at graduation. Implication being that a third of Clemson's living alums have graduated within the last 10 years. Now, I know some of that's grad school and things like that, but by and large, in my head, like the business takeaway that I have is a third of our alums are, low 30s or younger, in their 20s by and large. And so how do we connect with them? How do we engage, communicate, sell, event and experience, right? This is being broadcast live on Clemson Plus. That's a very intentional strategy and technology for us, right? And that doesn't hit all the demographics, but I think it certainly is more adaptive and maybe hits the 1/3 of our living alums, the 60,000 Clemson alums that are maybe in that demographic of having graduated within the last 10 years. So my point is that I think, David, the aggressive and maybe the perception, it's easy to jump to money on that, right? Oh, top 5 or Coach Sweetie, but again, I certainly do not view name, image, and likeness or NIL programming and offering, and however you would define that as aggressive or not, just to be about the money. Because quite frankly, I don't really know. It's so hard to tell, and disclosures, and that I'm not even really allowed to know exactly how all the collective fundraising really works. And that's a really comfortable and appropriate spot for me and our coaches to be in. So the top 5 and hearsay, really not sure. But I do know that we are, and I would agree with the definition of we're aggressive in our programming, our support, again, 110 Collective, and how that organizes and is educated in the community, and then ultimately how that connects for our coaches to recruit from a name, image, and likeness programming. So I would agree that we are very aggressive, and I know I've been forward in talking through that, and it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to be about it, and I think a lot of the programming and things in our community would support that. But also it might come across that we're not as aggressive just because, again, it's not all about the dollar here. And so I appreciate maybe that balance, that it sounds like it's two different things, but how I read it is when you really combine them and look at it from the bigger picture, it really fits Clemson. So again, that tangent to our alumni base is somewhat part and parcel, but also I think a big reason why I'm bullish and how we're going to continue to position Clemson athletics, NIL or otherwise, in the changing landscape.
Got time for another question or two?
A mile marker at this point, not that you could, of when you might have the next chapter written in terms of what happens with Clemson's conference alignment. But is it logical to think in a very crazy world that perhaps the way the order of business works during a college athletic year, that it probably wouldn't be until end of the year, spring meetings and such? That an invitation, if one is to come, would come your way.
Yeah, sure. I totally get the seasonality, and I know it has been over the summers where there's been more actions in the recent past. Get it. But again, that's our strategy and our positioning of Clemson and being well-read and well-networked is it's not agnostic of the calendar, but it's consistent. And will continue to be. And I know from a landscape standpoint, there's a lot of focus on college football playoff and that positioning now, but as that's changing, obviously starting next year and beyond. And so we're going to continue to continue to position Clemson, be great members of the ACC, and be very nimble in the changing athletics landscape, which means a whole lot for us beyond just conference affiliation.
So I'll take that as, again, you just don't have a mile for what you noted earlier. Not only mile marker, but nor a finish line. Right, again, just the movement of college athletics as an industry and as a model continues to change. As Jeff started, it's in a few weeks it'll be 2 years for me in this role, which is 10 and a half. It'll be 11 years for me at Clemson. And so, gosh, just in those 2 years, right, of how much the industry has continued to change. I know we've talked a lot about name, image, likeness here, and certainly landscape, but I have no anticipation that rapidity of changing environment is gonna subside, and that's why I'm excited for and hope I'm giving you some energy of how I'm going to continue to look to support our 575 student athletes, now 21 sports, which has changed twice in the past 2 years, let alone positioning Clemson on behalf of the university in the landscape.
Got time for one more.
There was a report in the Washington Post, I'm not sure if you saw it, about Coach Amy Smith.
Yeah.
Obviously it was at a previous institution, but have you read the report? Will you address it with her at all? And are you troubled by anything that you read in there?
Yeah, thanks, John. Saw the Washington Post article yesterday, which was really more focused on the sport, kind of a national lens on collegiate gymnastics. Couldn't be more excited for for Amy and her embarking on now officially starting our Clemson Gymnastics. We did work with the Washington Post and provided them a full statement that they didn't run the whole full statement. Jeff has and is happy to provide. But certainly I've been in dialogue with Coach prior to her hire and certainly since then, and couldn't be more excited for her support of her program, student athletes, our support administratively for those resources and expectations, and excited to kick off Clemson Gymnastics here in a couple months.
Just to follow up on what was the vetting process like for a coach like that, like her, or maybe just in general? What does that process look like on y'all's end?
Yeah.
Except for previous institutions.
That's right. Yeah, when we hired Amy, no different, thorough, but nothing unique, so to speak, for her or any of our sports that was caused to be unique about it. But very thorough in the background and the support since. And so excited about Amy and her support of our student athletes, and 6 of which transferred from Utah State with her here to Clemson, and just a lot of excitement and energy around that program at all levels.
Thank you, Graham, very much.